Hello, global gardeners. Happy Monday. Happy daylight savings time. I hope those of you who changed your clocks yesterday have recovered from the loss of an hour of sleep. Just think, when it changes back, you get an extra hour in the garden. Looking forward to that. Today, I wanted to talk something about the subject of medicinal plants in your garden. Now, when we talk about gardening, many of us focus on our vegetable gardens, our flower gardens, and that tends to be the focus. We think about what we're going to grow to eat or what we're going to grow to look at. And that is a big part of gardening. And so many of the gardening books, including my gardening book, focus on those particular aspects. How nice does the garden look? And what can you eat from the plants that you grow? Well, there's another component that I think doesn't get enough attention. And the more I learn about it, the more I'm fascinated about it. And it's the idea that you grow plants for the use of your health, to benefit your health, your body, your mind. And it's all happening around us. And what makes it kind of amazing is you're probably already growing some of those plants that can offer health benefits. Now, right off the top, I'm not going to say that I'm an expert on this, and I'm not going to advise you what you should take for your own health. But I'm encouraging you to look into it if you haven't already, to try to get some ideas about how you might benefit from the plants you grow. So, a good example of this is echinacea. The purple coneflower is the plant that I've been growing almost longer than any other flower in my garden. I've been growing echinacea for years and years because I love the plant. I love how well it does in my Colorado garden. I love the purple of the flower against the white of a daisy or the yellow of a sunflower. I just love the plant. Well, it took me a while to actually draw a correlation between the plant that I was growing for its beauty and the same plant that could be used for its health benefits. Now, think about it. You go to the market, it's cold season, you're looking for a lozenge, and you probably see lozenges that have echinacea in it. Echinacea has been shown to soothe your throat and make you feel better. And there's mixed studies to show whether or not it actually has any benefit to reducing the length of a cold, but you see it marketed for its health benefits. That's the same plant, the same flower that you're growing in your garden as a purple coneflower is the echinacea that's being marketed around the world for its health benefits. And there are so many other plants that fall into that category. Do you ever go to your cupboard and pull out a bag of tea to soothe yourself in the evening? Chamomile tea? Does it ring a bell? Well, I made a video a few years ago how I make my own chamomile tea from the chamomile that I am growing in my garden. It's incredibly easy to grow. And for many people, it can actually take over the garden. But it does have those properties to soothe, to help you relax, to really bring a nice end to a long day. And it's a garden plant. So I'll be talking about some other plants as we proceed through. I'd like to hear about what you're growing and the reasons that you're growing those plants, because until recently, I just grew these plants because I liked growing these plants. And occasionally I would make a tea, like an echinacea tea or a mint tea or a lemon balm tea for the soothing properties. But since then, as I've looked more into it, like last year, I learned more about stinging nettle. I began growing stinging nettle to make a tea, but not for me, for my plants, because the stinging nettle plant, the leaves really absorb from the soil and then retain a number of nutrients. So you can make a tea with the stinging nettle and then water your soil, and it helps incorporate some of those nutrients into the soil. That's why I started growing stinging nettle. But then when I started finding about some of the medicinal aspects, some of the beneficial health aspects to stinging nettle, last year I harvested the leaves and started having nettle tea. And it took a little while to get used to the taste, but I kind of like it now. So I've added nettle tea to my mix of mint and lemon balm and chamomile and other things that I'm growing from the garden. So it's amazing how so many of our plants can have multi purposes: the looks, the eating, the health. It's all wonderful stuff. One of the big ones, and Lawrence is mentioning this, calendula. Calendula is high on the list. If you do a search for medicinal plants, calendula is probably going to be in the top 10. Calendula has health benefits. The flower is also edible. You can put it into salads to kind of pop up the color and the flavor. And it's wonderful for attracting pollinators. You're exactly right. This is a big reason why I am already growing a lot of these plants to attract the beneficial predatory insects, to attract pollinators. And then along the way, you find out that you can actually benefit from it personally. And it just becomes a win-win situation when you start doing that. Christine, stress reliever, says, I grow all those except stinging nettle. And so the stinging nettle, it's one of those plants for some people, particularly I think in the UK, because the conditions are really nice for stinging nettle. It becomes a weed. It grows everywhere. For me, here in my dry Colorado, you do have to work a little bit to get the stinging nettle to start growing. But once it starts growing, it does great, but it doesn't spread. Mine stays in its nice little plot that I've got it in, and it isn't spreading around because my conditions are good for the nettle, but it's not perfect for the nettle. So it's happy in the nice little spot that I've put it, and it hasn't spread. So be aware that some of these plants could be a problem in some areas. And I think that may be one reason why people over generations have learned how to use these plants to be beneficials, because they're so prevalent. And it's almost a way to control your plants if you can use it in your diet or for health reasons. Sherry says raspberry leaf tea is also reputed to be anti-cancer. And a number of these health benefits, when I talk about growing a medicinal garden, uh, the the studies are continuing to come out, and some of them, yes, do have some anti-cancer properties. The nettle falls into that category. There are a number of these plants that we're growing that are antioxidants, which also promotes some health benefits to it. When we look at our home garden in general, the area that's probably the most researched and studied are the health benefits of plants. There's not a lot of research when we talk about our vegetables. Yeah, there might be research at the big agricultural industrial scale, but there's not a lot of research in the home garden for the plants that we're growing, the carrots and the spinach and the tomatoes and the peppers. It's all anecdotal. It's what we as gardeners share with others. But when you talk about the medicinal aspects, the apothecary that aspects of the plants in our garden, there's research and studies that go back hundreds, even thousands of years. If you look at some of the ancient Chinese writings that talk about what plants can be used for which benefits. So I put a link to a couple books in the description below that I have found beneficial to try to determine what plants provide what benefits. And I think that's a good place to start with an author who has some of the benefit of research and experience, and then starting to talk to other gardeners and what they do and how they're using some of the things. Prayer Warrior says, I use calendula to dry and use in skin cream. There you go. And there's a lot of that. And particularly in the books, you'll see tinctures and creams and teas and different ways to to use these plants. I've talked about comfrey. Comfrey is one of my favorite plants in the garden. I love it for a number of different reasons. I've got a whole bunch of comfrey growing in my front yard, my backyard. I did a video a number of years ago about making comfrey tea as a fertilizer. Comfrey has been used for generations, again, for its health benefits. And studies have shown that it does provide some skin healing benefits. It's also been used internally for different benefits. And so when we look at these different plants and we learn more about them, you do need to educate yourself, because in recent years, comfrey has been identified, because of some of the chemical components in it, as being harmful in large quantities to the liver. So the FDA does not recommend that you take comfrey internally, but it could be used externally. That's totally up to you as to the determination of whether you use these plants externally or internally. And I think finding out more information about it is highly advised if you're thinking about doing some of these things in your garden. Gardens Happen says hibiscus red rosella tea is good for sore throat. There you go. Now there's a whole bunch of these that are good for sore throats. It's amazing when you start looking at the different things you can use to soothe your throat, to cut down on inflammation. Really, if you're feeling bad with a cold or a flu, there's a lot of plant teas and tinctures that you could use to help you feel better. And yes, in many cases, there are actual studies that will show you the specific results that you can expect to attain for some of these. So Nancy Daniels says, I add nettles to soup. And so that's a good point. When we talk about using some of these plants in our diet, the benefits of the leaf or the root or the stem or the flower or the seed will vary from plant to plant, and how you absorb the nutrients or the particular chemicals from those different parts of the plants will vary as well. A tea tends to be pretty common, where you heat the water and pour it over whichever part of the plant you're using, and then you let it steep, and those chemicals then will gradually work their way into the water. So when you drink it, you're absorbing whatever those components are that you're trying to absorb. So if you can do it in a tea, yeah, why not do it in a soup? Some of them are perfectly suitable eaten raw, so why not use them in a salad? A lot of the herbs that we grow for our salads or for our cooking also have some of these benefits. And so that's why I say much of what you might already be growing, if you just change the way you look at it just a little bit, you might recognize that you've been enjoying some of these benefits because you're already eating some of these plants. Sean is saying, I plan on starting hops this year. I've heard there are tons of benefits outside of tasty beverages. Yeah, hops are a wonderful plant to use, and you'll see that definitely listed in a lot of these books for their benefits. Hops have an astringent property. And hops, if you don't know, is added to beer because it helps preserve the beer with the hops being used. Well, it kind of works the same way. Those same chemical components can benefit your skin, and it can also be used internally for different things. So yeah, definitely, Sean, that's one of those things that you can do. DLR 978 says, I vaguely recall hearing about the Brits during wartime collecting nettles for antihistamine medicines, which were in short supply. Yep. It's kind of a dichotomy, because there's so many flowers that we grow in the garden that will strike up our allergies. But yeah, a lot of these same plants actually have antihistamine properties. So if you have a problem with allergies, if you're growing flowers in your garden, look at some of these other flowers that might actually provide antihistamines to help you overcome some of those allergic reactions. It's just this whole area just really amazes me when we start talking about this. Paula Gross says, this is my first year to have a raised bed dedicated to just medicinal plants, flowers, and herbs. Good for you. And so I did a video last year where I talk a little bit about starting a medicinal garden. And I'm sure Jay's right on top of it if she hasn't already posted the link to that. There are a couple different approaches you can take. So my herbs, for instance, I have a dedicated herb bed for the herbs I use most: the sage, the thyme, the oregano, the lemon balm. Coincidentally, all of those have some medicinal properties. And it helps me to segregate those plants from the rest of my garden, because when I want to use them, I go straight to that bed. So having a dedicated raised bed is a great idea. But because so many of these plants just look nice in the garden, and I've talked about this before, I think diversity throughout the garden is really beneficial when attracting those insects that you want into your garden, the pollinators and the predatory insects. And so I intersperse a lot of these plants. So my nettle stands all by itself over in my pollinator garden near the echinacea and near the calendula, for instance. And then I've got others that are scattered individually in other areas as well. So you can take both approaches. You don't have to have a dedicated bed, though I think that's a great idea. You can just grow some of these as individual plants in different areas. And as long as you know where they're growing and how you plan to use them, go for it. Eli and Kate, good morning or good afternoon to you. I've gone a bit mad with calendula. Cool. We love it. The plan is to try to grow some new plants for teas. Now, though, I'm looking at all these seeds thinking, yikes, I need to get organized. Yeah, it's definitely a process. The organization has taken me years to actually organize my thoughts to get to this point where I'm focusing some of my plantings on the medicinal aspect. So, yeah, absolutely. It takes time, and calendula is a great plant. I love calendula. Well, and when you look at some of these plants, particularly ones that Eli and Kate have fallen in love with, look at how you can continue growing it. And so all those herbs I just mentioned in my herb bed come back every year. They're perennial herbs. And so I love knowing that the sage and the thyme and the oregano and the lemon balm are going to be there every year. I don't have to do anything for them. Calendula is a plant that self-seeds very readily for many of us. And so when I grow the calendula, I just let the seeds fall and expect new plants to pop up. The same with the echinacea. Now, the echinacea, I do spend more time starting the seeds, growing a plant, and then putting that plant into an area. But once I have the plants established, new coneflowers are popping up all the time. So you can start small. You can start with just a few plants. And if you've chosen the plants correctly, if you've chosen your location correctly, then you'll recognize that they'll keep coming back year after year. And it really becomes almost no work at all. Like Oops is saying, nettle is a weed here in Tennessee, but not a weed to me. I like the way you look at it. But absolutely, when everything fits and the plant has a happy home, it wants to grow. And a lot of people do think of that as a weed. But if you're doing it on purpose, if you're trying to grow more nettle or more calendula or more whatever, it's not a weed. If it has a purpose in your garden, yeah, I agree. I don't consider those weeds at all. Those are just more of a beneficial plant that you're trying to grow more of, to use more of. And so I look at the nettle that way. I only harvested my nettle once later in the year, last year, as I was learning more and more about the nettle. This year, I'm planning multiple harvests. So I'm going to take more time and focus more on my nettle so that I can harvest more of the leaves and actually learn more about it. So growing more of a thing, I think most gardeners would agree with this, is not necessarily a bad thing. Maureen Thomas is saying calendula is a beautiful plant. I infuse oil for balm and salves. Yeah, and so that's what's so awesome about some of these things when we're talking about it. And like I said, a tea is the most common way that people tend to think of it. But using infusions of oil, absolutely. And salves, of course. And you probably thought about um, the flowers, for instance, that you're growing in your garden and how you can use them in other ways. And so lavender is a perfect example of this. My wife used to make a lot of soap, handmade, homemade soap using lavender. At the time, she was buying a lot of lavender. I wasn't growing enough lavender to actually fit her needs, but it is one of those things when you think about that nice, soothing bath and you're using your lavender soap, there you go. There's a health benefit to lavender. So why not grow your own lavender and maybe consider making soap? If you don't want to make soap, you make a sachet. Use your lavender flowers in a nice little pillow. And there have been some studies that have actually shown that lavender sachets or lavender pillows can help you sleep. It really does have some soothing properties. So this whole field is just so filled with opportunities when you're looking at what you can do in your garden. I wanted you to start thinking about it today because for many of us, our gardens are just starting or our planning for the garden is just starting. And so getting the ideas of what we're going to put into the garden this year really can be beneficial. And so most of the seeds that I've gotten in just these last couple years actually come from survival garden seeds. And when I started thinking about planning with this garden, I've actually been in touch with Survival Garden Seeds, and they agreed to offer up their, I kind of read through this, it's a green package, but it's their Ultimate Medicinal Herb Collection. And so I've got a link below. They are giving away the Ultimate Medicinal Herb Collection. And so it's in the link below. Just click on the link. There's no obligation to buy. It takes you to a Gardner Scott page because we're partnered and you're all part of the Gardner Scott audience. And I thought it would be helpful if for some of you, we could actually give away some of these free seeds. So it's a free giveaway. Just click on that link below and it runs for 2 weeks through the 23rd that you can possibly get some free medicinal seeds to start your garden. And then I also asked them to add the functional flower garden kit as well. That does a lot. Some of the plants are the same, but it's for the focus on the pollinators and the beneficial insects, but a lot of those plants also offer medicinal properties. So it's not going to cost anything, no obligation. Click on that link to enter yourself to win some of these packages that Survival Garden Seed is giving out. And one of the reasons I like Survival Garden Seed is because they have these packages. So when I was starting to experiment with medicinal seeds, what's better than just getting a big package in the mail that has a whole bunch of flowers to choose from. And it's not all flowers, a whole bunch of plants to choose from. And they've already done the busy work to put the collection together. And it works out to less than $1 per seed packet. So I've talked about this in previous videos. I love Survival Garden Seed because for $1 a seed package, what could be better than that? And then if you're not interested in these seed packages, that's fine. Maybe you'll get some ideas on their website of other things that you might be interested in. But check it out and click on one of those links and you might get some free seeds as a result of it. I am glad that they are willing to work with me to try to give away some of these seeds to my audience. And I think it's awesome that some of you can take advantage of that. So take advantage of it. What's better than free seeds? I absolutely love free seeds. Betty says, I was hoping you were giving Galileo Moon tomato seeds. Not yet. I've got about another year to ensure. So the Galileo Moon is a seed that I've been working on to make sure I'm stabilizing the genetics. It takes about 7 years of continual growing before you can be assured that the genetics are stable. So I'm still in that process of growing and reaching the point of a stabilized new variety, the Galileo Moon. So it's coming, Betty, maybe next year. And just keep hoping. But yeah, when the Galileo Moon is ready for dissemination, I'll be giving a lot of that away as well. So Sherry's saying, I used to sell my soaps to raise money for my wildlife rehab work. Oh, there you go. That's a double benefit. Grow, especially if you're growing your own lavender or other flowers that you're using in infused oils for soaps, and then using those soaps for wildlife rehab. Oh, wonderful idea. I like that idea a lot. So there's Jay with that link as well, the same one that's in the description. Thanks, Jay. See, giveaway is open through March 23rd, and there's the link uh, to send you to the Gardner Scott page on Survival Garden Seeds. And anytime you go to Survival Garden Seeds, not just for medicinal seeds, they've got a lot of other great vegetable kits that you can grow. Do use the Gardner Scott code to get a discount. So if you, even with these packets, I think they're included in the discount for the code. So if you don't end up winning free seeds and you want to get some of the seeds, do make sure you use the Gardner Scott code at Survival Garden Seed, and you should be able to save some money in most cases. So yeah, Boothby Gardens right now, it's just in the United States, and so if there's a way we can have it sent otherwise or to other countries, I'll definitely look into that, because I want everybody to be included. Absolutely. Shawnee Grows says, collecting the leaves, flowers, and roots of many plants over the season to dry and infuse gives us a wonderful opportunity to play around in the winter, creating soaps, lotions, bath teas, salves. Yeah, I like that idea a lot. And so when I was growing lavender and saving the flowers, that was a primary focus, absolutely. But there's no reason why you can't experiment with other things. I was looking at getting a still, like a distillery kind of still, just a tabletop model, to actually make oil from my lavender flowers as well. Haven't done that yet, but it's on my list of many, many things that I want to do at some point, is to make my own lavender oil from the flowers that I'm growing. And you can do that with a lot of other flowers and leaves and roots. And so think about that. If you like to experiment and try new things, it's worth a try. Sherry says, I encourage all making skincare infusions to use jojoba. It's the closest to human sebum and is most easily utilized by our skin. You can grow jojoba in your garden. Many of us can, at least, not everybody. Great idea. Great idea to grow plants to actually use. If you are using skincare products, if you're using healthcare products, look at the ingredients. And if there's an ingredient there that you recognize that you might already be growing in your garden, learn how to make it for yourself in a nice, safe way, and particularly following the guidance of experts and the research. You may be able to custom make your own products. I love that idea. Hi, Pat. Thank you for that. Good morning to you. It's always nice to see you, Pat, especially on a nice sunny day with the weather warming. Oh, I love it. Pat says, aloe comfrey salve soothes these old, dry, cracked hands that know for these great bids. So thank you. That's a great idea. Yeah, the aloe is another one of those. Often grown as a house plant. If your environment is right, you can grow it outside. And I've done that, where if you have a sunburn in particular and you break off a leaf, and it soothes the skin, absolutely. And then the comfrey, like I mentioned earlier, great way. Mixing the comfrey and the aloe, great idea. Hadn't thought about that. And so it definitely soothes old, dry, cracked hands. I was just talking about that yesterday with a good friend about my dry hands, and I am too seldom putting lotion on my hands. But some of these plants, like the comfrey, yeah, you could be out working in your garden and just tear off a leaf, and just along with other plants that have the same properties, rub them around on your skin. And if you've got some irritation, it's those kind of plants that can actually soothe your dry, cracked hands. Love it. Absolutely love it. So good suggestion. Gardens Happen says miracle leaf, Calancho pinnata, can help with kidney stones as it prevents the minerals from binding. It has a number of other health benefit claims not all supported by research. So thank you for that, and thank you for that little bit at the end, because that is a big part of this. Strongly encourage that you look into the research when you can find it, just to help substantiate some of these claims. And a lot of these claims really can be substantiated because of the research, university level research, but also a lot of other types of research that have been done. So Shandy's Garden says, I don't make soap yet, but I do want to. Uh, it's pretty easy. I've been involved with a lot of soap making. My role was often to pour the lye in, or to stir it, or to pour it into the molds, or to release it from the molds. But it takes a little bit of effort. I used to, well, I still do like, but every year I make jams and jellies. And so at the time that we were doing soap as well, I found that the soap making was very similar to making jam and jelly, as far as the amount of time concerned, that you're standing over a hot pot and stirring it, that you have to pour it into a container at the end. And so if you make jam and jelly, you can make soap. It's pretty similar, and the time that it takes to do both is also pretty similar. So soap making is wonderful, and there's nothing like using your own soap when you're in the bath or the shower, particularly when you've custom made it with the fragrance that you like or the oils that you like. Yeah, look into soap making, and you can do a lot of that with what you're growing in your own garden. So take advantage of that as you learn more about your gardening. I talk so much about learning in the garden, and so often I'm referencing the vegetables, the varieties, building a good soil. All of those things are important when we're talking about medicinal plants as well. But when we shift that little bit of focus to look on how we're going to use our plants, then it opens up a whole new world. It really does create a whole new opportunity for you in your garden. Jay is saying to encourage using hand lotion, it is in fancy dispenser beside the sink soap dispenser. Also best with slightly damp hands. So there you go. Yeah, if you're making your own lotions, I like that idea. Separate it and make it fancy, make it distinctive. And learning those kind of things, whether you put it on a dry hand or a wet hand or damp hand, is important. So thank you for sharing that, because those are the kind of things that those of us that are learning and are trying some of these different things, when others have done it, it's helpful to get that kind of information. Shandy's Garden says, I do make jam and jelly. I just made some cranberry orange jam with leftover Christmas cranberries. Awesome. Yeah, soap is not that much of a stretch from a jam, especially if you're making a jam with cranberry and orange. You're adding all those different ingredients. It's pretty much the same. Hello, Big Will Dog says, the best thing about medicinal plants is the ability for an individual to take their health into their own hands instead of others. Absolutely. So many people, more and more, are growing their own food because they want to have control over their own food. Why not grow the plants that will give you control over a cough or a sore throat, or maybe some antiseptic issues that you can bring into your bathroom, or the antihistamine that we were talking about, and you have control over that, and you find out what works for you and grow it. Shawnee Gross says, we sure do learn as we grow. There you go. And so that's one of the things I find so interesting with all of this, is that I've been growing these plants, as I said, for a long time without recognizing everything that plant can do for me. I love doing what I can for my plants with my soil and with the watering and the location and all those other things. And it's not that I expect a payback, but the plant is more than happy to offer the payback. So might as well take advantage of it. And I will agree with you, DLR978. You say disagree with Scott on that one. Soap making is a chemical process, mixing water and oil with a caustic that gives off heat and changes pH. Jams don't do any of that. Well, actually, they do. And so when you make a jam and jelly, you are changing the pH. You're lowering the pH to an acidic point where the jam and jelly becomes stable. And that's what allows a jam and jelly not to spoil when you make it. So you are definitely changing the pH of jams when you do that. And yes, there is a caustic. I don't wear gloves when I make jam, but I do wear gloves when I make soap. No, the idea is more just the time and the basic process, that if you can stand at a stove and stir a pot of jam, then you can stand at the stove and stir a pot of soap. Yes, I wear goggles when I make soap. I don't wear goggles when I make jam. So there are some key differences, but the basic time involved and the basic processes is what I was talking about as far as how we do some of those things that we can make for ourselves. So that's where the safety factor comes into play. Sherry says, please encourage would-be soap makers to look into small batch making first. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It is both a science and an art. Invest in heat-proof pitcher, pair of goggles and gloves. There you go. Yeah, exactly. It is important that you do the soap making the right way. So I apologize if I make it sound too simple. But after you've made a batch, it's easy to get hooked. And then you make another batch, and a single batch, and most of the recipes definitely follow a recipe, because like jam and jelly, you have to follow a specific recipe for it to turn out to be the product that you want. And so the right ratio of the oils and everything else that goes into soap making is very important. And you make it as a small batch. And we would typically cut our batch into 6 or 7 individual bars of soap. When you get good, you can make back-to-back batches and you can make bigger batches, but definitely start small and start with a recipe from a recognized, approved source, and then follow all of those necessary health and safety precautions, because you're dealing with lye, and lye is caustic and it can harm you. But in the dozens and dozens and dozens of batches of soap that we made, neither of us ever had a problem with the lye, ever, because we followed the safety precautions and we took the time to learn how to do it. So have fun with it, regardless of what you do. Even if you don't try it, have fun with it. I'm Just Stardust says, I was searching on your channel and couldn't find a video on soap making. It would be nice to have a video on it. I would like to make my own soap, but have no idea how. Okay, thank you for that idea. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll get with my soap making buddy, and maybe we'll make a video. So I hadn't planned on that. That is one of the, I've got a list of hundreds and hundreds of potential videos. I can honestly say that is not on my list of videos that I've thought about doing. But since we're talking about it today, I'll add it to my list. And you never know, if she decides she wants to make soap again, I'll make sure I'm there and I'll film the process. So it'll be like a guest host, because she does most of the work. But that's a good suggestion. I'll have to collaborate and see if maybe we can do something like that. Alora S says, I'm disappointed that my full medicinal garden has to wait. Our budget got really tight this year. I also have to be careful of what herbs I use. I have autoimmune issues. Well, so Alora, definitely click on the link below to enter the giveaway, and you may end up getting some free seeds this year. That would definitely help you. And then when you do get to the point, as I mentioned earlier, for all of us, when you're starting a medicinal garden, look at the plants you're growing and how they propagate. Do they propagate from seed? Are they perennials that come back every year? Do they propagate from root or cuttings? Look into that. And that initial expense with those seeds or whatever, if you buy the plant at a nursery or you grow it yourself, how you continue growing it in the future can be important. And so I always look at how to propagate so that I don't have to buy seeds every year. This year, I'm not planning, well, I so far have not bought any new seeds, and I'm not planning on buying any new seeds because I have a ton of seeds and I've saved a ton of seeds. So I really want to move forward myself using the seeds I already have, especially the seeds that I've saved. And some of those seeds are calendula seeds and echinacea seeds. The plants I'm growing in my garden, I'm absolutely saving those seeds to continue growing into other areas. And when you look at this, it's also important to consider the individual plant you're growing and what those seeds require. Many of these medicinal plants that we're talking about that are perennials will benefit from cold stratification. So if you get the seeds, put them in your refrigerator for a month, 6 weeks, whatever time you have, and that often, almost always, helps with the germination of those seeds. And so I've got all my medicinal seeds in my refrigerator right now because I'll be starting a lot of those here in the next week or two. Uh, Store them in the refrigerator, and that just helps take care of that stratification. So be aware of that. I find, because of just my own weather patterns and the climate I have, that many of these plants do better if I start them indoors ahead of time. So many of these plants are easily sown from seeds outdoors. You sow the seed, the plant grows. But when you have a harsh environment like mine and low humidity, I find it works a little bit better if I can start the plant indoors in my nice, controlled, warm, seed growing environment, and then I'll put the plant outside. So, uh, totally up to you as to which preference you have, but think about that aspect. If you're going to choose to grow some of these seeds, if you happen to be the one that wins a package of the free medicinal seeds, you might need to stratify them. You might need to start them indoors, and uh, that might be best for you. The seed packet will tell you whether it's an indoor or outdoor plant for the recommended perspective of the seed producer. But I, even when it says sow outdoors, I often do a lot of it indoors just to help me get a little bit extra success. Just because by the time my soil's ready, it's suddenly summer and hot and dry and windy. And not all new flower seeds do well in my garden in that situation. So that's why I choose to grow a lot of things indoors. And it can make a difference, really can. Shawnee Gross says using herbs to make infused honey, making syrups. Awesome. Yeah, that's an easy way to use, especially if you're making a tea. So, combine a lot of these methods as well. You can grow some of these herbs to make a tea, and then if you infuse your honey, use that honey in your tea. And so now you have an infused honey that adds flavor to the tea that you're drinking for whatever health benefit you're looking for from that tea. So, uh, especially if you have your own bees to make your own honey, oh, that makes it even better still. Oh, there's Mala. She's saying hello. Thank you for your appearance. She's telling me that we need to get outside. Today is going to be a beautiful day for us. This may be the warmest day we've had in a while, and she wants to get out and enjoy it. So there's Mala. Yes, I love you too. And she's saying her hellos to everybody. She's been napping at my feet. That's what she normally does at this time of the morning on Monday. So they're saying hello to you. So you have a lot of people saying hello to Mala. So, okay, go on, go lay down. Okay, let's see. Let's get back. I appreciate all of your warm words for Mala. And Sherry says, love the cameo. Yeah, that wasn't planned. You probably saw that wasn't planned. But it shows you that my dogs are here all the time. The puppy is in the kennel because she has a tendency of eating some of the things that are in my office. So until she overcomes that tendency of chewing on some of my stuff, she's in the kennel during these shows. But she's getting close. She no longer has to sleep in the kennel. Yes, I allow my dogs to roam free at night, and she definitely is taking advantage of that. But they're both great at night. And they're both great while we're doing the show as well. So Jay Dixon says, a guest appearance by Mala. Hello, everyone, but Scott should be outside. So I'm getting there. It's coming. It's close. And Silly Lily says, dogs rule. Absolutely. So thank you for all of that. She's back down by my feet and just waiting, but we will continue with the show because there's more questions I'm sure you have, and I want to make sure that we cover some of the issues that you're having. So I'm just Stardust says, what are you drinking when you do a live, coffee or tea? It's tea. And so green tea is mostly what I drink. So today I'm drinking a green tea, but I vary it from time to time, whether it's a morning tea or I drink iced tea almost exclusively during the afternoon. And then if it's an evening tea, then it's completely different. So it varies by day, but normally I start the morning with a green tea. I'll have a raspberry and or mint tea in the afternoon. And then, often an echinacea tea in the evening. And so I'm a tea drinker. I don't drink coffee. So in case you were wondering, yes, it's a cup of tea. And I like the variation of it and mixing it. So the mix, so the nettle has a distinctive flavor, and you can't describe it because it's nettle flavor. But mixing nettle with mint in particular, for me, is pretty tasty tea. And both of those have some benefits. So what's better than that? Till it says, going to try growing some medicinal herbs and flowers this year. Awesome. That's why I wanted to do this. I wanted you all to start thinking about something new in your garden. Not that gardening gets boring or mundane, but when you add new things to your garden, I think it really does add the potential for excitement and enjoyment. And some of these ideas really can be exciting. When I was harvesting my nettle, I was excited to harvest my nettle for the purpose of taking it in and drying it and making a tea out of it, because I'd never done that before. I'd heard about it, I'd read about it, and then I started doing some research on the benefits of it. And I was excited, absolutely excited, to harvest my nettle for my own personal benefit. And I think that's wonderful. DLR says, I like to grow bergamot for homemade Earl Grey. And so bergamot, if you look at a list of the medicinal plants that you can grow, bergamot is often in the top 10. And yeah, bergamot is what's used in making Earl Grey, one of my favorite teas. So on Sundays, Earl Grey, for many, many, many years, has been my tea of choice. In recent months, I've actually been drinking a Scottish tea on my Sundays. But when I go out, if I'm having a breakfast at a restaurant, I always order Earl Grey. And you can grow bergamot in your garden. I've got bergamot growing in my garden. And when you're growing these different plants, particularly for teas, there are different parts of the plant that are used for different purposes. And learning that aspect of it is also just fascinating to me, that some plants you can use all parts of the plant. Other plants, you might just be focused on one aspect or another. I want to grow flax this year. And if that, I'm getting a spot ready to grow it. And if that happens, you'll see the video. But flax seed is something that you see in health stores all the time. And I add flax seed to my granola. So that's what I'm planning to do this year, is to grow flax for the purpose of saving the seed, not only to grow more flax, but to also use, because I'm already using flax seed. So do an inventory of the things that you already have in your diet or that you're adding to the different foods. And even if it doesn't have the really top-notch medicinal properties that some of these are touted for, you can still grow it. And it's so much. The echinacea, I show it in that video. Drinking a fresh made echinacea tea is just out of this world. And you can't get that when you're buying the commercial bag from a box at the store. It's an alternative, but when you can grow it yourself, oh, it's just absolutely so much better. And that's why I really am going to encourage it. Lily Cardosa says, going to plant echinacea. Never thought of it. Just bought some tea. There you go. See, it is so easy. And echinacea, the cone flower, is one of those plants that for almost all of us, it can grow well in the garden. For some of us, like me, it's drought tolerant, so it's ideal for Colorado in my soil and in my weather. It's one of those plants that I really don't need to do anything with because it's just so at home in my dry, windy, hot environment. And that's a big reason why I started the show talking about the echinacea, because I've been growing it for years, long before I ever thought of using it for the health benefits. So go with it. So yeah, hey, thanks, Jay. Yeah, yesterday I was on the Urban Gardener show and answering a lot of questions. I know some of you were there at that time, including Jay. And so thanks for that link. You could always go back and check the conversation that Enoch and I had. And we talked about a few different things, talked about seeds and sowing and what's happening in the garden. So always fun to have those conversations on the second Sunday of every month. So Bohemian Herbology says, Rosemary Gladstar, godmother of herbalism. Shout out. Nice. Yeah. So check the books. I think I'm pretty positive that one of those books that I have linked below is Rosemary Gladstar's book. And that's what really got me excited. It's a great book. It's got great information in it. And yeah, godmother of herbalism. So if you've got any interest in herbalism, check out the link to one of those books below, and you may get hooked. You may start growing it. And as I said previously, one of the nice things about adding these kind of plants to your garden is you don't have to have a dedicated bed. You can. It makes it really easy, but you can grow these in pots. You can grow them in just little sections of the garden, particularly the annual plants. Throw them in with your vegetables. If you're growing a bed of anything, tomatoes, peppers, squash, carrots, cabbage, consider adding some of these other plants that are annuals, just like your summer vegetables are annuals. And you get the benefits every year by adding those plants to your vegetable garden. Or think about some of these that are the perennials, and then find a nice little spot and grow them every year in the same spot. You don't have to dedicate a lot of space. And by adding that diversity to your garden, you're just increasing the overall health of your garden because of the insects and the animals that you're attracting. So there, other than the fact that you're adding extra plants to your garden, and sometimes that can take over, there's really not a lot of bad to say about doing the extra varieties and spreading some of that diversity throughout your garden. I really like that as a way to go. So something to think about. Diana G is asking, any experience with baldo plant for tea, similar to appearance to oregano, also known as toilet paper plant? No, I don't have any experience with that. So maybe somebody else has, and you can answer that in the discussion. But no, I'll have to look into that, because oregano does really well for me in this area. And so if I can find similar plants to plants I already know are doing well, another win. If you can find the plants that do great in your garden, keep growing those plants and keep growing plants that are like those plants, and you can really have a benefit. And so the toilet paper plant, Mobius is like, what? So there are some of those. So and I think, do I have some of those seeds here? I'm looking through some of these seeds that came in the mix, and some of the ones I don't. Mullein, here it is. So mullein, which is one of the survival garden seeds, I've heard referred to as toilet paper plant. So I don't think it's the same one. that you're talking about. But mullein, I grow mullein in my landscape, and it is a native plant um, to some areas of Colorado, and I just let it grow in my garden. I let it reseed. The birds eat the seeds. I let the stalks. It's a tall stalk. I like the look of the plant, but it's got a flat, fuzzy, soft leaf, and that's why it was called a toilet paper plant, because it was used by that purpose by some people in years past. And so there's a lot of those kind of plants that have multi-purpose that you may be able to use for multi-purposes. Mobius says many plants have been given bad names and we have lost that wisdom as a result. Exactly. Mullein is known as skunkweed. There's a whole bunch of plants that are known as skunkweed around here. And some of them, there's one that I know as skunkweed that is a small plant with little yellow flowers. Beautiful plant. It's actually one of the food sources for the rabbits, the wild rabbits in my area. But when you brush up against it, it smells pretty bad. So yeah, the reason we buy a plant doesn't always match with the name that the plant is given. But if you like it, grow it regardless of the name. And definitely don't use stinging nettle as a toilet paper plant. Yeah, the stinging nettle, that's another one of those when we talk about the safety making soap. I went to harvest my stinging nettle knowing I needed to wear gloves, and so I put on some latex gloves. That wasn't good enough. I was stung through the latex gloves. So the only way I can harvest my nettle is with leather gloves. So that's an important tip. Keep those kind of things in mind through all of the safety factors in our garden. There are some plants, even if they have a health benefit, they might actually be difficult to harvest because they're like the nettle. It stings. It hurts. It does cause a reaction on your skin. Be aware of that when you do it. Yeah, like he definitely says, "Ouch." Yeah, I thought I was doing good, and oops, says use tongs on nettle. I tried with the tongs, and so I had my latex gloves and tongs, and I was doing both for the first time, and I just couldn't quite figure out. So I'd grab with the stem with the tong, and then I'd take my pruners and I'd cut off the stem, but it was just kind of awkward. So I thought, well, gee, since I'm wearing gloves, I'll just go ahead and pull off some of these leaves since I've already got gloves on. No, it doesn't work with the thin gloves. That's how harmful the stinging nettle really can be. Little bit of rubber or plastic, not enough to stop it. So take that in mind as you move forward. And so, yeah, John Jude says for the sticker plants like that, you can grab low on the plant actually. And yes, that is one way to harvest them, is to grab low and pull it from the ground. SJK says jewelweed gel can soothe the stinging nettle. Break the stem and rub it on. Oh, I don't grow the jewelweed, but maybe I'll grow some jewelweed next to my nettle, because so far I'm the only one that has had that issue wandering through my garden. But I wouldn't be surprised if someday my granddaughters might be in the garden. And so, yeah, being able to grab the jewelweed right next to it, I like that idea. So I'll look into that. Thank you for that suggestion. It's these kind of, that's why I love these conversations on Mondays when we're talking back and forth, because there's a lot of these kind of things that we can learn from each other, that it works for someone else. Sherry says jewelweed soothes poison ivy too. There you go. I didn't know that. So isn't this wonderful? So a lot of you, I'm sure, are writing down jewelweed to check out. And Oops says, I have wild jewelweed everywhere in Tennessee. Hummingbirds love it. There's that multi-benefit to it. The hummingbirds on jewelweed, yet another reason for me to look into growing jewelweed. So I love that. I like growing comfrey, as I mentioned before, because I've used it as a fertilizer to douse my soil. It also helps relieve some of the skin irritation that you might have in the garden. But the flowers, I love the flowers on that plant. It's one of the first flowers in spring. And so when I'm hoping to attract pollinators to my garden, the comfrey is in flower before a lot of those others have even begun growing. And so that's a double score, triple score, depending on what you're using the plant for. A lot of these plants have wonderful, wonderful flowers that you can use to attract so many wonderful things to your garden. So uh, thank you for mentioning the jewelweed. There's a lot of discussion going on. Bohemian Herbology says jewelweed, great plant to incorporate into soap making. I've seen it at Amish markets. There you go. Wow, if nothing else today, we all have learned a lot about jewelweed. And Non Chadley says jewelweed even grows well around black walnut. So awesome. Black walnut, for those of you that don't know, there's a chemical called juglone that is in black walnut, and it tends to permeate the soil around the black walnut trees, and it is a allelopathic chemical, which means it prevents other plants from growing. And so if jewelweed is tough enough to grow in a soil like that, it's probably going to grow. Obviously, we know it grows well in Tennessee and a lot of other places. So, okay, I'm sold. You can see jewelweed in my garden. I'll see if I can find some seeds, or maybe it might already be included in one of these packages that I already have, because I'm really trying to avoid buying seeds this year. So I'll see if I can find someone that is growing the jewelweed. Riverdale Gardens says just standing in the garden is beneficial to your health, lowers the blood pressure. Absolutely. And so I'm glad you said that, because when we talk about the beneficial aspects, the health aspects within your garden, yes, the focus today was trying to spread the idea of growing specialized plants for specialized purposes. But that's why so many of these plants are already in my garden, because I just like standing and sitting in my garden and just absorbing the beauty, the fragrances, the sounds of the insects and the birds. Absolutely. That is so beneficial to my health, my physical and mental health, that's why I do it. So even if there's a plant that may not have research to show some type of skin or throat or whatever benefit that you might have, just by having a plant in the garden that you like growing and that looks good, go for it and grow more of it and grow more of those kind of plants. Hey, Tony. Tony from Simplified Gardening says, hey, all, sorry, we'll have to watch replay. Was working, may have to disappear without notice. Well, I hope it's a quiet evening for you, Tony, and that you don't have to disappear and that you can stay with us for as long as you can. But appreciate you checking in, mate. Check out Tony's recent video on pruning. It's really good. I've made pruning videos in the past, and I've got multiple pruning videos. But Tony's video takes a lot of that pruning information and condenses it into a really nice single video. So yeah, check out Simplified Gardening if you're interested in knowing more about pruning your trees and the rights and the wrongs. Of course, look at Gardener Scott's videos too, but Tony's video is recent and really has some good information. Shandy's Garden says, are there any herbs where we will be increasing pests like aphids, something that works like a trap? I haven't seen any herbs that act. The trap crops that I use for aphids tend to be brassicas or leafy plants. So the few times I have aphids in my garden, usually early in the season, they're mostly attracted to the weak brassicas. And that holds true with a lot of the other insect pests if they show up in my garden. I have so few insect problems, and it's because of the diversity. And so the herbs that increase pests are highly unlikely. I'm not aware of any of them. In fact, it's the opposite that happens. If you grow an herb like dill, for instance, grow dill and let it flower to the point that you have the dill flowers and then you have the dill seed, which is also great to use in your different recipes. Well, the flower, that umbel of the dill plant, attracts a large number of predatory insects, specifically the predatory wasps that will attack aphids. So if you have an aphid problem, growing a lot of these herbs and these medicinal plants will actually be attracting the insects that are going to take care of the pests that you have. And I mentioned the comfrey is one of the first to flower for me. Dandelions. Dandelions are a great plant, medicinal purposes, absolutely. Fertilizing purposes. I made a video about using dandelion to fertilize your garden, but the dandelions are among the very first to grow in spring. And what is the first insect that almost invariably I see on a dandelion? It's a ladybug. So ladybugs are voracious aphid eaters. So by growing a lot of these medicinal plants and herbs, you're attracting the lacewings, the predatory wasps, the ladybugs, and they'll take care of the aphids for you. And so you can try the trap crops, absolutely. And like I said, they tend to be the leafy brassicas for me in my garden, and they also are trap crops for a lot of other pests. But I don't have a big pest problem because I have that balance established with all of these other plants that keep coming back year after year. And I have a bush that's just outside my gate that leads to my driveway. And every year I have aphids on that bush because it's in a terrible location. It doesn't do well. It's always weak in spring, and that's what attracts the aphids. Aphids are attracted to weak plants. I'm okay with that. I let the aphids come because within 3 or 4 days, the ladybugs appear. They eat all the aphids off of that bush, and then they move into my garden and they live there for the rest of the season, taking care of whatever pests are there. So I'm actually okay attracting some of those aphids. So if you can find one of those trap crops, go for it because they'll often attract those predatory insects that will take care of a lot of things in your garden. So thank you, Jay. Yeah, there's that link to the dandelion video that I talked about. And so dandelions really, I love dandelions in the garden. Absolutely. The earlier we're talking about what's a weed and what's not a weed. Dandelions are not a weed for me because they have so many beneficial purposes. Dandelions, you can eat every part of a dandelion, from the root to the flower. And depending on how you want to use it, you use different parts of the plant. Dandelions were a great way for me at the school to teach the students about plants and how you could use your plants. And when it came time to weed the dandelions, if they were in some beds that I didn't want them in, I just taught the students about the benefits of dandelions, and they were pulling up the dandelions and eating the leaves and eating the flowers and munching on the root. So great way to get kids involved, just to tell them about a weed that they can actually eat. And before you know it, it's not a weed anymore because they're eating those plants. So absolutely wonderful way to do it. So Christine Stress Reliever says Ever Wild Seed Company has yellow and orange jewel weed in stock. Okay, so if I were to buy seeds based on one of your suggestions, that's really not me choosing to buy seeds. Maybe I could get some jewel weed seed and not undo my plan for this year, which was to not buy any seeds. So, the perils of being a gardener who just likes buying seeds and growing new plants. It's so terrible. But yeah, I'm going to look into jewel weed. I am going to check all of the, because I've ordered some medicinal boxes and bags before, the medicinal kits or the medicinal groupings, and I might already have jewel weed. So I'm definitely going to check what I already have. But if I don't have it, I'm sold. I need to get some jewel weed. So I'm not going to count this as it's not in my vegetable garden. So I'm not going to count this on my goal of trying to garden this year without buying any seeds. So if you all are okay with me buying a package of jewelweed seed and not undoing my plans for the garden, then I'm going to go for it. Sherry says, suck it up. You're going to buy more seeds. No, really, seriously, Sherry, I have not bought any seeds yet this year. Seriously, it's been, I haven't been able to say that since the days before I was gardening. So maybe one package, right? Just one. So we'll see. So there you go. Mobius says, make a short admitting to it. So that's a good suggestion. Tammy says, if you buy the seeds, it's for educational purposes. There you go. So if I make a short, if I make a video later in the year talking about some of these benefits of plants, then yes, it is for educational purposes. It's not for my own personal benefit, right? Yeah. However you justify your gardening, justify it however you want. That's what I'm working on right now. Carla says, just one little package, just one. Yeah, that's how it starts, Carla. It starts with just one. And before you know it, you've got a big package of seeds that you don't know what to do with. So thank you for all of your support. I appreciate that. But yeah, Betty says to twist my own arm. There's not a lot of twisting involved. And DLR says, figure out a way to justify it. I think the educational and the making a video about it is probably justification enough. And I was sitting in my garden. You may have seen that the video where I talked about that was my goal this year, was to not buy seeds. I was sitting in my vegetable garden when I said that. And that was really the focus, not growing anything in my vegetable garden except for the seeds I already have. So this is a new area. I'm expanding. I'm adding more to it. I think that's justification enough. So I'll get evergreen and I'll get some jewelweed seeds by the end of the day, probably. Sunset Gazing says, I did go over 1 year without buying seeds. Good for you. It was liberating. And that's exactly why I want to do it. See if you can buy a plant instead of the seeds. Problem solved. Well, I don't know if the problem is solved if you buy a plant instead of a seed, but I appreciate your sentiment on that. And this is the approach I usually take that Riverdale talks about. Just one seed collection with 50-pack bucket, and that's what I've done. So I've got the 50-packet bucket from Survival Garden Seeds. I did a video on that a couple years ago. Yeah, that's kind of the approach. That it was like, if I just get this one bucket and it's got 50 seeds in it, it's awesome, right? So that's why I like Survival Garden Seeds so much, is because you can get those buckets and you can get the big packages. And if you're just joining us, be sure click on the link in the description below, because I've partnered with Survival Garden Seeds to give away some of their 36 seed collections. And it's free, no obligation to buy, and it runs for a couple weeks. So I'll get the name of the winners from them in 2 weeks. And so in 2 weeks, I'll plan to announce the winner. And by then, hopefully you'll already know. I think they'll contact you directly with that, and once you win. But yeah, click on the link below and you might win some free seeds in one of those big packages that's got all those seeds in it. And even if you choose to buy, it's less than $1 a seed packet in a big box or a big bag. What's better than that? Thank you for that, Jay. There's the link for the free seed contest from survivalgardenseeds.com. Wasabi Gal says, I didn't buy any last year, so this year it's a celebration that started in January. You know, I did have that thought. I was trying to decide for next year, doing something along those lines, that if I could go a whole year without buying any seeds, to then celebrate next year by buying new seeds. So I'm glad you said that. It's one of those options. Dusty Flat says, I just ordered more flower seeds. Have no idea where they will go. See, there you go. That's the problem. Well, it's really not a problem, because eventually you'll find a way to use them, even if you can't find them in your own garden. I know you'll give them away to someone, but just the excitement of thinking that you'll be able to find some place to put them in your garden, even if you don't have an idea of where they're going to go. It's exciting. And Lama Lama, I agree. It's educational and medicinal. Good justification. Good justification. Because we grow tomatoes because they look good and they taste good, right? And we grow flowers because they look good and they smell good, right? So why not grow something that looks good, attracts beneficial insects, can soothe our skin if we get stung by the stinging nettle, and it's educational in the process. Oh, I love you guys. You're extremely helpful in helping me overcome some of my addictions here in the garden. So, Sunset Gazing says, make seed balls, disperse the beauty of wildflowers. Yeah, I like that idea. I did a video on seed balls. Gosh, I think it's been 4 years ago now. And I actually did that. Some of the areas right where my stinging nettle is, a lot of those plants around my stinging nettle, I use seed balls that I had made in that video. And they're also suitable for other areas as well, that you can disperse the wild seeds that you're growing, the herbs that you want to grow, the plants of any type. You can make a seed ball, put it into some obscure area, depending on your climate, depending on the seed, depending on the plant. You may end up having more of those plants just because of a seed ball you put together. And I'm sure that Jay is fast at work trying to find the link to that seed ball or seed balm, I think is actually what I called it in the title. So yeah, that's a great option to dispersing some of these seeds, especially if you're saving your own seeds. So have fun with that. I love dispersing seeds into new areas and seeing those plants begin to grow and add the flower color, the texture, the variety to other areas of the garden. It just attracts more of those wonderful insects that I want to attract. So it's a great way to go. There you go, Jay. How to make seed bombs, the seed balls. There's that older video. So that was fun to make. Actually, had a comment on that just yesterday from someone who's watched it in just the last couple of days. And so I give a recipe in there that involves clay, powder clay, and then you wet it to bind everything together. And in that video, I mention the possibility of using kitty litter as an alternative, because many kitty litters are also made with clay. But they were asking because they had used the kitty litter and it wasn't binding it all together to form a ball. Do check, if you choose to use a kitty litter, the ingredients, because it might not be 100% clay. It might be some other ingredient that doesn't dissolve and clump and bind with the seeds. It will clump because of the cats using it, but it might not work best for the seed, which is why I use clay as the binder when I make my seed balls or seed bombs. So keep that in mind. Patricia says jewel weeds listed on the U.S. Forest Service website as the native in Colorado, but likes shady wetland. That's good to know. Yeah, I'll definitely do some research into it. And so that could work in that area around my stinging nettle, because I have a couple young trees that will eventually begin shading that area. And because I've got it all mulched, it stays relatively moist. So jewelweed might do okay for that area. And so do that same type of analysis. If you want to do a new plant in your garden, do that analysis. Is it going to work in the garden you already have, or are you going to need to modify your garden plan to add that plant? Which is why so many of these plants are grown in pots, because they might not be suitable for your landscape, but they might be suitable in a container that you can grow. So do a little bit of research before you blindly grab a seed and start growing it. I always recommend that you learn more about the plant, then put it into your landscape. And that helps you take care of it better. If you know what a plant needs, you are more likely to provide that benefit to the plant. And then you can get the benefits of the plant. So definitely look for those kind of things. So Jay's good suggestion. If you get jewel weed seeds as a free offering from a friend, seed library, or subscriber, you're not buying seeds. And that's the approach. So I am growing some new things this year that have been given to me, and I am not buying seeds. My seed library, local seed library, closed down, but that's why I said I'll ask around to see. I don't know if Sean is still on here, but some of my garden club friends and see if maybe they might be growing something in that area. So good suggestion. I'm just Stardust says seed bombs is an excellent way of sowing very large area of deserted land. You drop the large diversities of seeds in clay balls and you can sow vast areas without much work. Yep. I talk a little bit about guerrilla gardening in that video. And because that's the idea of just going to deserted areas as a guerrilla warrior and planting, sowing, getting plants growing. Great way to help out Mother Nature, because Mother Nature will move in and bring plants to a deserted area. But if you can choose some of those native plants that would do well, you can help Mother Nature out in the process. And that's the approach I like to take. Mobius says, in talking about some of the discussion going on about cilantro, says, my cilantro bolts so fast, I just harvest seeds for culinary and let the flowers attract beneficials. I actually am growing a slow bolt cilantro, and that's what's called slow bolt cilantro. And that's why I wanted to go ahead and comment on this, because if you have a problem with bolting, you might be able to find a variety that bolts slower. It still bolts pretty fast for me in my garden as well. And I do the exact same thing. I leave those flowers going. They're great for attracting beneficial insects. And then I harvest the seeds to either replant or I allow them to fall to the ground to re-sow that area for next year. Or I use them in different recipes that call for it. So something that definitely can be beneficial in those plants that bolt. Yeah, let them flower, let them attract some of those things that can be beneficial to your garden. Okay, let's see. Sherry is suggesting Valerie Warwood's book on essential oils as an excellent source of education and cautions people need to understand. Thank you for that suggestion. There are magical stuff used right. Okay, so I haven't done much with the essential oils. Like I said, I wanted to actually distill some of the lavender to create my own oil. But there's so many other essential oils that you can either make or purchase, and so many different ways to use them. So thank you for that suggestion. Oils is a whole nother arena that you can get into, that you can tie back into your garden. So that's what gardening. Yeah, I've said it many times. You'll never know everything there is to know about gardening, because, like we're talking today, there's all these offshoots, these other areas that you can move into to take advantage of the skills you've already learned, but then also use it as an opportunity to learn more and to try new things. So I love the idea of getting into some of these things that are new to try out, and because you may find something that you love doing and you didn't even know it existed until somebody suggested it, and then you thought you'd give it a try, and before you know it, it's now on your list of must-haves for your season. So go for it. Bohemian Herbology says, I'd adore to find a slow bolt variety as well. And so I'm trying to think, since I've grown so many of the survival garden seeds, and I know they've got a cilantro. I'm trying to think if that's where I got my slow bolt cilantro, was from survival garden seeds. I don't know for sure. I'll have to check to see my box and what all is in it. But a lot of the seeds I've been growing in the last couple of years are from survival garden seed. And so it's possible that they're the ones that provided the slow bolt variety that I've got. So keep that in mind as you're choosing your seeds, and you're looking for a specific type. There are slow bolt. I grow slow bolt spinach, because spinach also tends to bolt pretty quickly for me. Napa cabbage. I finally found a slow bolt Napa cabbage because I've been wanting to grow Napa cabbage to actually make kimchi. I ended up making sauerkraut with it because it was just so great. It was perfect for sauerkraut. But I specifically looked for a slow bolt variety. And so if you have that problem, just do some searches and you should be able to find the seeds that match that particular component that you're looking for. Because definitely slow bolt can makes a big difference for those of us that have these really, really hot in summers that just come on overnight. So you're planting when it's still cool out, and before you know it, just about the time the plant is starting to produce, then it becomes so hot and it bolts. Slow bolt will buy you a couple extra weeks. Absolutely. Lauren says, I'm going to grow amaranth instead of spinach. Cool. Yeah, amaranth is a fun plant to grow. The little amaranth seeds, particularly like if you grow the purple amaranth. Oh, it's a beautiful, beautiful plant and edible. Yeah, you can use it as a spinach alternative. So that's another aspect when we talk about the health benefits. If you want to grow your own plants for whatever part of your diet, it doesn't necessarily need to produce a medicinal benefit. It can just be an alternative to something else you're growing. And amaranth, wonderful plant. It grows well for a lot of gardeners. I love it. Go for it. Mike says, I want to grow Carolina Reaper peppers. And so there's actually benefits to the hot peppers. I have I make myself a hot cacao drink every evening, and I sprinkle in some of my hot pepper powder into my chocolate because of the beneficial properties of the hot peppers. So the capsaicin actually has some benefits, and I use that as well. So yeah, grow Carolina Reaper peppers for the potential benefits. Pretty hot, but I've made powders, pretty hot powders. You don't use a lot of it, but great to add to the diet. Great idea. There you go. I'm just Stardust says, good idea. Hot peppers and chocolate. You know, that's how it began with the Aztecs hundreds of years ago. That's how they drank their chocolate. They did it in the beginning and it worked for them. Why not continue the tradition? So that's kind of the approach that I've taken over the years. Shandy's Garden says the Malabar spinach loves the heat and climbs so beautifully with its red vines and thick, supple green edible leaves. It's very healthy with the mucilage typically found in okra. Interesting. I haven't grown the Malabar spinach, but you make it sound incredible. So thank you for sharing that. Silly Lily says the thing about gardeners is that they want everyone to be one and be successful at it. There you go. Isn't that a wonderful thought? That who else do you know? What other hobby do you know? There's a few of them. Don't get me wrong. Gardening isn't the only one, but within gardening, yeah. If you are a gardener, and not just somebody who's growing plants. And I do differentiate between the two. You know, I think that people who just grow plants don't appreciate what it means to be a gardener until they become a gardener. And when you become a gardener, one of those aspects that differentiates you as a gardener is that you want to help out other people to be a gardener. And if they're already a gardener, you want to help them be a better gardener, or you want to learn from them to help yourself become a better gardener. I love that. That just makes all of us such special people because it is this community that we are all helping each other with, be it suggesting a particular variety that works for you and might work for us, or offering a way to use a plant that maybe we hadn't thought about before. All of these things are just so wonderful. And I just appreciate all of you so much for all you do, spreading this information to each other and to me. And of course, allowing me the opportunity to spread the information I have to you. It makes all of us special. And it is the thing about gardeners, as Silly Lily says, that we want to be one and we want others to be successful at it. The thing about a gardener, it's just so much of it, you can write it down, you can talk about it, but you really can't express the feelings that gardeners have when they're in their garden. And I've tried to explain that to non-gardeners, kind of like we were talking about earlier, just being in the garden and just absorbing the health benefits of just being in the garden. How do you explain that? How do you study that? How do you research that? And there has been research, of course, that talks about the health benefits, particularly the mental health benefits. But how do you actually explain that to someone who doesn't have a garden, who to someone who is too busy in their life to stand still and literally smell the roses? I think we don't always have to explain it. Just by being a gardener, we understand it. We know that we are receiving those individual personal benefits that mean something to each of us. And we don't have to justify why we're a gardener. We don't have to explain to another why it gives us that special benefit, that special feeling. We just know it does, which is why we want to go out and do more with it. So go out and do more with it. I hope the weather is good for you in this upcoming week. Definitely click on the link below and see if you can win some of those free seeds. And along the way, every day, when you're in your garden, enjoy gardening. I'm going to see you next week. Hope you're here. Have a good one.